Hello, this is Harvard Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So feedback is important, and I will list those outlets where you can reach me in order to give that feedback to me. Now, here's a list of some of the audio platforms that I'm on. I'm on Spreaker, of course. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, just to name a few. Now, this episode is all about my aspects about I'm just talking from my point of view about the benefits. Now, I touched on it a little bit on Saturday on Substack, but I'm going to go in more depth. And this is going to be the outline for future shows onto the year and so forth. So I'm going to talk about my perspective about books, my perspectives about literature, and my perspective about comics and graphic novels and how those intertwine with one another with the aspects in the arena of books and literature. All right, here we go. Okay, so here are my thoughts about literature, books, and comics and graphic novels. So now, I think books they really do in itself take you to other worlds if you wanted to, and it's a means of escapism, I think, with the aspects of different literature. You know, when you get to the classics with the aspects of, there's so many that's running through my mind. You know, you get the classics with Charles Dickens, you go into other countries, you explore that, the Swiss Family Robinson, you get, now, you know, The Lord of the Flies is a very controversial book. The list goes on. Now, you can also, if you're an avid reader, and I think there was a really good thing, you know, particularly in the aspects of what was really unique about the 90s and so forth. I mean, every decade has something that's really unique to or specific to that particular decade. But I just thought it was so impactful how literacy was really pushed and the importance of literacy. And so, you know, it's unfortunate, as I had said in another podcast about LeVar Burton, but the way, you know, his political ideologies are outweighing the means of the social impact of what he contributed to, what he has contributed to society. It's unfortunate, but the legacy of Reading Rainbow alone has really impacted, even though, you know, that was required a lot in the schools and public schools to have a source of watching that. And then me, I was, you know, nerdy kid, still nerdy here. I don't think that's a bad term, but it, you know, thank goodness that trends, you know, it's good to be, you know, intelligent. It's never bad. It's never a bad thing here. And so I think that shows like Reading Rainbow it really made the aspects of reading and literacy and understanding the concept of what books can give to you, contribute to a child, very fascinating. And then there was all these other programs in school when I was my husband and I, when we were growing up, to insinuate children to continue the aspects of literacy, of reading, and have a love for reading. We had the Book It program. Those who know, you know what I'm explaining here. With the Book It program, you read certain books in a month, and then you get star stickers, and when you collect all those stickers, you get a prize. You get a personal piece of, for the most part, or so forth. And then we didn't necessarily have that, but it was more. It was more of a working system. It was more impactful when I was in middle school with the aspects of reader level, and then if you excel out or you're at accelerated reader, that is, you get other level of reading content to where you can go all the way to college, to high school. If you're that avid of a reader, you're that advanced. And my husband, he was that advanced, and that's again, it's very resourceful to have those sort of tools to keep insinuating the importance of literacy. And so I remember when I was starting college, I think this is a really good word of advice too. And I think they're all important, but when the aspects of subject matter and the aspects, it's more important to know career-wise where you want to go with college, if that's the way to go or not. That's a whole nother subject in itself. But the advice that he said to me was that, you gather all these different skills here when you start college. But I think vastly the most important skill to have is reading and writing skills. Because in itself, if you know what, I'm paraphrasing what he was explaining to me. He said, if you know how to communicate well, if you know how to write well, that in itself gives you the tools to become a strong leader. And then, this in itself shapes the aspects of how people move in our society, because if they have people who have strong reading, writing skills and can express and articulate themselves, a lot of situations can be solved in that manner, I think. So, for instance, some things can simply be solved because it's just miscommunication, misunderstanding, and it becomes extreme. And so if you have a person on your side that knows how to first write that well and express that well, and first read and understand how to read what was the terms of service of something, and then explain it to the other person really well, then a lot of issues can be solved. And I think that's the impactful aspects of literacy here. Now, besides what I said here, I think one of the most well-rounded things that literacy and literature can give to contribute, has contributed and continues to contribute to our society, is the impact of social commentary of its time. So, for instance, when you get into the aspects of books that are banned and versus books that were relevant of its time, and the reasons behind the banning and so forth, and the reason behind the moral aspects of banning books here. So, for instance, a book like Tom Sawyer. Now, it's unfortunate a lot of people want to have that book banned, because of the aspects of how, and Tom Sawyer, the African American, how he was portrayed was very realistic. And it's unfortunate that, it goes to say the people who are just outraged to be outraged to start crap because they want to start crap. And then it also is telling with the people who actually didn't read the story or they don't understand anything. And they just, snip and pick at something that is, and sensationalize it and get people, gaslight their butts into, just gaslight them in general into saying, hey, you know what? I think I might take offense to that because that is not right. Oh, my goodness. But they actually didn't take the time to read the book. Now, Tom Sawyer has said this a lot. Mark Twain has said this a lot. And he's a really good example of the aspects of being, he knew how to win over a crowd. Even saying mundane things, he knew how to captivate people's attention. And so a lot of the things that he wrote was very controversial of his time because he wanted to go there and take it to another step and just be very honest about the aspects of the dark history that American culture involved itself in. And I think that's very admirable of him. But people want to sway it into another way. And so he also made it very important, too, that when you travel and you escape out of your comfort zone, as I mentioned about comfort zone yesterday on, for listeners and then for listeners on Substack, paid listeners and listeners on Substack. When you travel, if you want to travel and if you want to take the benefits of traveling, if you want it to, it gets you out of your comfort zone. And then you start to see other points of views other than your own. And that in itself erases narrow-mindedness and bigotry. And that's something that's very poignant in itself. And I think that's the whole reason why he wrote the sort of stories he did, because he's trying to get people to understand you have got to get out of yourself in order to be self-aware of what is going on around you in order to improve it. And that's what was missing, and that's unfortunate about the aspect of a book like that being banned. And so when we go to Orwell books and so forth, it's quite understandable why those kind of books were banned, because, especially with Animal Farm, when you get in the aspects of, we don't want children having favoritism of making light of dictatorship, authoritarianism in itself. And that's very interesting in the transition and what we see of today with the aspects of books and culture. So explain to me here. Now, it's one of those things where you got to have common sense when you're doing something. But it also leads to the point of the people who are pushing these aspects of how outrageous it is to ban books like LGBT plus books and to middle schools and so forth, how outrageous it is to do that, because it's wiping away the aspects of inclusion and being tolerant of other people's other identities outside of what is the norm. Why should children be exposed to that? And that in itself shows the real culprit about what the agenda is. They want to what? Any answers here? No, you can't answer, but what? They want obscenity. They want to they want to mess with children's minds. They want to warp their minds to where their useful tools and to where they don't have a strong moral compass. They don't have that, so they can be susceptible to anything and everything, and that's very scary and sad in itself. And I think that that's really prevalent in the aspects of everything. So now I had said this briefly, but I'm going to go more into it. So the aspects of more along the lines of social commentary and how that's very prevalent in literature. Now, with religious undertones, when we get into allegories and everything, that's very prevalent too, and famous literature, with Moby Dick, with the aspects of allegory, with addiction and not being able to, not being able to let things go, and the allegory with 7 deadly sins, with the with the Odyssey, and so forth. And then when we get into even more with the chapter and the chapter of Dante's Inferno, that's even more prevalent. That's about a lot of allegories, but also it relates to the aspects of the political injustice of its time too. And so these things sprinkled in literature, it really gives us an insight of what people in those particular times in society think. And I think Paradise Lost is a really good example of merging all these things together, all these interesting concepts together too. So within itself, with Paradise Lost, it has the aspects of philosophy, religion, and contemporary commentary all mixed together if you look at it, outside looking in here. So what do I mean by that? So with Paradise Lost, we go in and we realize that we're looking at the overall arc of the story of how Satan here came to rise and fall. And we start to see everything from a different point of view to maybe you have some empathy for Satan. And it's like, what the heck? How can you have empathy for something so sinister? And so that breaks the line in the impact of the aspects of the moral reality of religion, specifically with Christianity. What the imagery is presenting in the Christian text about the origin and the aspect of Satan and the aspect of God and everything. And I think in itself that gets you to look within yourself and to actually understand the text of Christianity, and it begs you the question, in a contemporary sense, do you want to go on what other people are telling you about Christianity? Do you want to go on, or do you actually want to dig your heels down, get into the nitty-gritty, and actually understand what is being said and learn from other people what is being said about the Christian text, and then decide for yourself if that works for you or not? And that's something, to me, that's what I take from it. There's something that some stories like that were able to be told in that kind of sort of time period that Paradise Lost was released, because, that was heretic. You couldn't touch on subjects like that, particularly if you're getting in the aspects of religion. That's something to really talk about. And then when you go into the Gutenberg press, and then there's one or two things. So it's said that the story of Gilgamesh was the first story that was ever published. And then it's on the flip side with the mass appeal of the first things that was really published was the Gutenberg Bible. And so those two stories, these two things really correlate with one another with the aspects of how important religious is in itself to every culture. So people say that, and which I do, you got to look in between the lines. I do agree with that, where, stories that are in the Bible, they relate to other fables that has happened before. And the story of Gilgamesh is a really good example of how that's undeniable, how that relates a lot to the story of Noah. And then with the aspects of the Gutenberg Bible and the printing press, that goes into aspects with a lot of the commentary of how people were living their lives at that time, because a lot of people were very illiterate at that time, and the elite could afford to read and understand and write. And so with the Gutenberg press of the Bible, it was these elaborate illustrations of telling the story. And that in itself gives another interpretation of other people interpreting the Bible to people that can't read for themselves. Miscommunication of not really fully understanding. And people get these dogmatic or warped views about Christianity in itself. And then, when you get the Protestant Reformation and, you get Martin Luther with the aspects of the church and the church being not so clean in itself, particularly with the Catholic Church, and, Mark and posting the thesis on people's doors, Martin Luther, getting people to wake up and be revolutionized in the aspects of what's going on in that church and deciding if you want to change that or not. See, the aspects of literature, the impacts of books and culture really into and it's very ingrained into people's lives and to society without. And I think people, there's people that get it, but it's just, I can't stress it enough. These are really good examples of how prevalent literature and everything of that sort of nature is to our society, the fall or the betterment of it. And so I'm going to wrap up and I'm going to talk about comic books now and graphic novels. Now, since comic books came out, people were begging the question that comic books were the aspects of breaking down of society. It was the disdain of society. And in particularly with parents, being concerned and worried about the type of content that were showcased in comic books. But in itself, comic books and graphic novels have made and shaped a way of its own to where they go to I think from my point of view, they go to the next step of really, really, truly shining a light and being a big mirror a lot on social commentary in which people are living their lives. So, and the changes, the pivotal changes that happens from decade to decade, and the pivotal changes that happens with technology and advancement of technology and so forth. I think X-Men and I think the Watchmen there's so many, but specifically these two are really good examples of the aspects of how the transitions of an industrial society uproots and alters the human experience. And so what I mean by this, for X-Men, you get an elite class of heroes out of the adversity and the downfall of toxic waste. It makes a lot of commentary with the aspects of where do we go with the advancement of the Industrial Revolution, that the use of it and the misuse of chemical of nuclear fusion, and how that's impactful to our society in itself, and how we live in an environment where we're constantly exposed to these elements. What does that in itself mean for us as citizens? And that's something that is really uprooted, I think, a lot, and talked about, and made a lot of commentary in with X-Men. Now with Watchmen, you get into the aspects of being very honest about the aspect of superhero. Now, it's not really showcased in a flattering light. The aspects of being a superhero is seen as somebody that's, mentally ill. If you get into, that with Rorschach and so forth, you get into that mentality of how he goes about his life day to day, and you see the details and the elements of his psyche. He's not really all there. And so that begs the question about the aspect of how ugly that can get when you get into that sense of always being on the justice side of cleaning up society. And then, you get in the aspects of other elements of business and femininity, and the aspects of loyalty, the aspects of marriage and relationships and so forth, and they're very, very intimately presented in Watchmen. And then when you get into the aspects of graphic novels here, it takes everything to a upper level, to where comics, I think, just snips of, stories. But when you get graphic novels, you get the layers of elevating the illustrations, but you actually have more story and more subplot to it. Not that comic books don't do that, but I don't think that it does that to a grander scale as graphic novels do. All right, with all this being said, I'd like to know what your aspects are about this latest show or everything. And I'd like to know what you all think about the impact that literature has on society and comics and graphic novels. What do y'all think? Feel free to reach out to me. I'll give you all of those links in this episode. So this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye for now.